Welcome, fantastic friends, to the new episode of the Fancast at 4 podcast, the number one Fantastic Four fan casting podcast on the internet.
Presumably.
Yes, presumably. I'm Dan Bettenhausen.
And I'm Jack Mayer.
And we are your hosts as we venture into the what-ifs of Marvel's first family, who will be appearing in Phase 6 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
With Matt Shakman set to direct the MCU's Fantastic Four film, we can still explore what it would be like if a different director was behind the camera and who they might cast.
This week, we are excited to have our friend Matty Gunner joining us from across the pond. Matty is not only a friend of the podcast, but he also helped create our awesome theme music. Matty, thank you for joining us, and please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Hey, mate, thank you very much for having me. It's been quite a while in the works for us to do this. Luckily, our schedules finally collided. So I'm a big, movie fan, as you guys know. We met through the whole action army and Schmodown related world. And I'm also on the side of a bit of a musician. So when Dan came to me and asked me to write the theme for this show, it was a no-brainer. Of course, I was going to do it.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about your band. You're in a band.
I'm in a band called Mourner. We are a kind of melodic, hardcore, pop punk, little bit of synthwave stuff here and there. I like to mix it up a little bit, but a lot of heavier, but I hate when bands say this, but it's so true. It's like very heavy, but also very melodic at the same time. God, I hate when bands say that, but it's true. It's the only way I can really describe it.
Well, I certainly appreciate it because, to be quite honest, not my normal type of music that I listen to, but knowing you, I certainly appreciate you challenging my musical horizons. So thank you for that. And again, thank you very much for the theme music. I love it. I'm sure I'm going to speak on behalf of everyone who listens to it. I'm sure they love it because
it's excellent.
See,
thank you. And it's very much outside of my comfort zone as well. When I spoke to my producer and songwriting partner, Matt Hart, shout out to Matt, I said, let's write, because yours was kind of the first intro that we wrote from scratch. We'd done a couple of other show themes before, but they were like riffs and stuff that we'd had in the bank. Yours was the first one we wrote from scratch. And I was like, okay, it's got to be kind of 80s themed, like a movie intro. And I'd been listening to a lot of synthwave at the time, a lot of like Gunship and Black Audio. And I was like, let's write something like this. And I kind of came up with a bare bones idea and I sent it to him and he made it an actual song that you can listen to and enjoy. But yeah, I'd never written anything like it before. So it was cool to do. It was something really new for us from coming from a hardcore and a metal background.
I'm glad we could be your guinea pigs. And certainly for our first go at it, well done.
Thank you.
Now, when we were talking, we had gone over a few different directors. We had some lined up. But really, after more and more conversations, I know you were very excited about a movie. No spoilers yet about a movie that this director has coming up. So we are actually we were excited to shift gears with this director for this episode. This director is a British-American film director, producer, and screenwriter. His films have grossed more than $5.7 billion worldwide and have garnered 11 Academy Awards from 36 nominations.
The films are typically characterized by existential, metaphysical, and epistemological themes, exploring morality, the construct of time, and the malleable nature of memory and identity, which is exactly the level of pretentious that he wants you to think his movies are.
That's so true. I mean, the man is an absolute visionary as a director, but you've only got to read 2 interviews with the guy to be like, oh, you're one of those directors. You're an artiste, huh? You're a director.
He's written most of his films with his brother Jonathan. He runs the company Syncope with his wife Emma Thomas.
Well, if you haven't guessed it yet, we are featuring Christopher Nolan. Matty, how does Christopher Nolan and his films make you feel? What comes to mind?
There are a lot of like thinking man's films, and especially coming from my background in mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu, it's very like thinking man's sport, and I very much enjoy stuff that kind of stimulates my brain, especially when it confirms that it's still working. But a lot of like, there's the whole thing, we don't know what's out in space. We have a rough idea of how time works, but we can't exactly be sure. There's the whole phrase of time being a construct, and a director kind of playing with that kind of motif is like, yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of like the first film of his I saw was Memento, and a movie being done in reverse. I was like, no, I've never seen that before. And I had to study it for film studies in college. I'd never heard of a director do anything like that before. So it was really interesting. So yeah, just the way he approaches things in terms of like looking at time as something that can be played with and molded like a piece of clay, as opposed to one linear construct, I think is really intriguing.
And to that point, for how heavy and thematic his movies can be, the juxtaposition between that and him being a master of the big screen. And when I see big screen, I mean like IMAX, his use of IMAX filming, and just the scope and scale of his films is impressive. Again, he's a master of IMAX filming.
He's a filmmaker. He makes movies he makes movies on film, and he makes movies to be shown on film.
Yeah.
You can tell that he just so appreciates the craft of movie making, and that he's always looking for a way to push any kind of boundary that he can.
Yeah. And I feel like that even goes down to the people that he works with. I mean, there's the whole game of actor or movie star. He's more often than not going to work with someone who's more of an actor, like a Christian Bale. You wouldn't think he's a movie star. Like he's an actor. And frequently collabing with Hans Zimmer, like that's one of the best composers of all time. I mean, not better than John Williams, but he's definitely a close second. So yeah, it's like he has every little detail planned out for a big motion picture. Like his movies are kind of like events.
Well, I think that's a great segue into our first segment, which is 4 fantastic films. And here's where we will discuss 4 great films by Christopher Nolan.
What we're doing now is, now that Jack is now a full-time co-host, when we have a guest, the 3 of us will pick our own personal favorite films by the director, and then I will pick a 4th one, whether it's something that has been very prevalent in the zeitgeist, something controversy, something. There will be a reason that 4th film is picked, but these first 3 we'll be discussing will be each of our personal favorite Christopher Nolan films. So Matty, without delay, let's talk about this first film.
Yeah, so the movie I picked is my personal favorite Nolan movie, The Prestige, with Christian Bale, Hugh Jackman, Michael Caine, the legend that is Michael Caine. And Scarlett Johansson pulling off one of the best English accents I've actually heard an American actor pull off. Like, her London accent is actually really good, and I didn't think it would be. But yeah, this films about magicians and magic in general kind of they don't tend to gel with me. So I was really interested in this one when Nolan took it on, because I was like, okay, it's gonna have like a Nolan twist on it. And then you get the reveal of every magic trick has 3 parts. I was like, okay, so he's breaking it down into 3 different sections. And then again, you have the whole, it's not done in a linear structure. You have Christian Bale reading Hugh Jackman's journal at different times. Hugh Jackman's reading Christian Bale's journal, and just the rivalry between the 2, but you're seeing it play out not in the correct order. Then you throw in the whole Nikola Tesla situation, which, by the way, I completely forgot until I rewatched this, that David Bowie plays Nikola Tesla. That's incredible. I completely forgot that until I watched it
Brilliant
back.
casting.
Excellent. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, and this is the one that I constantly go back to. If I sit down and I'm like, I want to watch a Nolan film, this is the one that I constantly go back to.
Yeah, this movie was kind of surprised. I mean, we had Nolan kind of come onto the scene with Memento, and then he had Insomnia, then The Dark Knight, or Batman Begins, and then this was just kind of thrown in between. But he made this really amazing, inventive, and I think that we struggle so much today with regurgitation of IP now. IP everywhere, IP this, IP that. That is the buzzword of the day. of the movie going era. And we have Nolan, who took this film about magicians and turned it on its head, made it interesting. And what I love about like the three parts of a magic trick that you kind of alluded to also was kind of in line with how a movie or a screenplay is produced too, like with how the beginning, middle, and end play out as well. And due to Nolan's love of film and filmmaking, and now apparently magic, like he was able to interpose both the film and the themes of the magic trick together brilliantly.
I will say, though, as the number one fan of the Now You See Me franchise, I do take offense that Matty doesn't like movies about magicians.
Well, you don't forget that this movie, there was kind of the era where we were getting like duos of the same kind of movie. We had Edward Norton's The Illusionist come out at the same time.
That's right.
Yes. Yes.
Like, so we were getting a lot of movies that were kind of like pseudo pairs here. We had The Prestige and The Illusionist come out. Prestige, I think, won that battle. If we're in any sort of movie war, The Prestige was the winner.
The Prestige wins that 11 times out of 10. And I also think it's possible that the growing up in England, getting so burnt out by Harry Potter being everywhere is also kind of like helps with a bit of the burnout on the magician front. But Jack, I don't know if you have anything further to add, but one thing I also love is how, like you said, Dan, there's also multiple different ways of doing the trick. Nolan finds multiple different ways of making a movie.
Right.
So it's also like a kind of him saying, hey, look what I can do. I'm something of a magician myself.
I know that you brought up Memento as having this like really weird structure to it and this really fascinating way of telling a story. I think The Prestige, though, is the first one that's got like this really big twist in it. I feel like you can kind of figure out what Memento is by I would say like maybe a third of the way through, halfway through. With The Prestige, it like keeps you on the edge of your seat until you get to that twist. And then you feel like you have to go back and rewatch it and find all the clues. And that's what Nolan's really good at, is that puzzle box sort of figuring out where something is placed in the story, how it's going to connect to this thing. Why is he choosing to focus on this? Why did he make this shot here? It's so intricately well done. And I feel like this is really where we see that start to blossom.
It's almost like a Rubik's Cube, if you think about it. It's like you don't get the Rubik's Cube as a whole piece. Like all the different colors are in each little section of the Rubik's Cube, and it's up to the audience to put it together as opposed to the filmmaker. Like it's up to us as the ones trying to solve the Rubik's Cube, as opposed to the person who gave it to us or made it. Like we have to put it together ourselves. It's not until Nolan gives us his Prestige that he's like, okay, here's how it played out.
If you haven't watched The Prestige and you're just a Batman Nolan fan, you should really watch The Prestige. It is great movie. With that said, let's move on to our second film, which is our co-host Jack Mayer's favorite Nolan film. So Jack, I will let you intro this movie.
So after the Dark Knight trilogy, I think people were ready to write Christopher Nolan a blank check to do whatever he wanted to do. And he decided, you know what I really want to do? I want to make a space movie. But I don't want to just make any space movie. I want to make a dumb space movie. And that is what we get with Interstellar. By far my favorite Nolan film. Probably one of my favorite movies. It is mind-numbing how dumb this movie is, but Christopher Nolan, I don't think cares. He is using Interstellar as this spectacle to show off how good he is at visuals, and he is so good. I saw this movie with two of my friends in middle school. I think we went like opening weekend, and I just remember sitting there and initially not liking this movie because I was like, this movie is trying to be too smart. It's not. Casey Affleck's doing whatever weird thing he's doing. But then I started to actually think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to think less about it and just appreciate what an absolute marvel to look at this is. But again, the more that I found myself loving the visual aspect, the more the emotion ended up coming out from it. It was, my relationship to this movie is so strange because now I do find myself resonating with these dumb characters. I find myself getting invested in the number of times that Matthew McConaughey says "Marv." Like, I find myself wanting to try to figure out the bookcase wormhole, but knowing I never will, and that's okay because it looks really freaking cool. Matt Damon gives one of the most laughable villain performances I've ever seen, and I would not trade it for the world. Let me ask you guys a question.
Yes, please.
When you think about good writing, do you think that it should be subtle? Do you think that it should let the audience, if it's asking a big question, do you think that it should let the audience come up with the answer to that question for themselves?
For the most part, yes, I do.
Christopher Nolan doesn't, because he's going to give you this amazing scientist, this brilliant person, but he's actually evil. He doesn't care about the planet, and his name is Man.
Man.
It's so dumb. I love it. I adore this film.
It's almost like he's essentially slapping the audience in the face with saying, look how much smarter I am than you.
And he is, but he's also so much dumber than us.
Yeah.
It's also like, well, you're not that smart.
So he is the grandfather paradox.
Exactly.
So I went into this movie. I didn't like it the first time I saw it. That was the only time I saw it until this weekend. But I think the opposite thing happened to me. I was not thinking too much when I walked. I was thinking too little when I saw it the first time. I amped up how much I was thinking about it, and now I love the movie. Granted, no idea. I know they try and explain like humans of the future somehow made the bookshelf wormhole.
Because his connection, his love for his daughter is scientifically quantifiable.
It's the friends we made along the way.
That's the real bookshelf.
But no, to this point, everything else I thought was really strong. I mean, not just the visual effects, but like the physical, practical effects too. I liked the sci-fi elements of the spaceships, the robots. Was it
TARS?
Yeah, TARS. Thank you. I knew TARDIS was not correct. Very ingenious use of practical and visual effects there. I think Anne Hathaway's character is very strong. Regardless, I am very pro Anne Hathaway, as you may know on this podcast. But I thought she was great. Another strong performance by her. And I think I look at Matt Damon's Man a little differently. I don't look at him as evil. I look at him as just having gone mad. And he just, in his madness, became a shit weasel.
And now Man will destroy us all.
Right. But if you do want to see Matt Damon in space, just watch The Martian. That's a much better Matt Damon in space portrayal.
It's a better Matt Damon performance in space.
Which villain performance of Matt Damon's would you say is better, this or him in Dogma?
I would go with We Bought a Zoo. He's keeping those animals from a zoo that actually knows how to take care of them.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good point.
Last thing that I will say about Interstellar, I know that there are a lot of people who think that Coop, who's Matthew McConaughey's character, is kind of a dick to his son because he forgets about him and only cares about his daughter. But if my teenage son was Timothee Chalamet, I'd think the same thing.
Wow. No love for Timmy Showers on this podcast, huh? Okay.
Only in Little Women, Timothy, and actually in Dune.
Dune Chow's pro that. Yeah.
You're not going to be lining up for Willy Wonka, no?
Can't say that I will, no.
Okay, well, now let's get into the best one, my favorite, and that is the Best Picture nominated Dunkirk. And
what did it win?
Editing and then the sound categories.
Yep.
Okay.
This for being a Best Picture nominee, I feel like it's one of his most underrated in just general movie going circles. I think people because it is, for all intents and purposes, a very small scale war story, at least small scale in relative to Nolan once you get to his Batman movies. But this movie, we talk about him toying with the idea of time and time being a big theme. This uses not so much the spacey kind of themes of time, but more just the structure of time very intricately and very precisely in this film, and it just captured me. This movie is structured with 3 different stories. You have The Beaches, which I believe is over a week's time. You have Mark Rylance's character on this little dinghy going to go with the hordes of British trying to rescue these soldiers on the beaches, and that's over a few days. And then you have Tom Hardy as this pilot, this dogfighting pilot, over a span of hours, trying to go provide air support, and just the different interlaying of the time and how the score and the ticking of the clock interlaced with the score. I mean, I could just keep going. How time is fascinating and a major element of this movie, and I dug it. I also love how when you see the perspective of, say, Tom Hardy doing some dogfighting, and then in a different scene, a few scenes later, you see Mark Rylance on the boat, seeing the dogfight happen later, and just that perspective shift is fascinating. There's no main protagonist, which I could see why it might not be everyone's favorite, because there isn't someone to just latch on to as far as a main character. For all you Harry Styles fans, maybe it's him, though he's kind of a dick in this movie.
But he's good. He
is very. This is probably his best performance that he's given for the 5 minutes of screen time that he has
in both film and music. When he's not singing at all. Sorry, Ed.
Hey, we don't need Harry Styles fans coming after us. But I think this isn't, I would say, an acting-driven movie. It is scenery, it is action, it is tension, and that, to me, those are the main characters of this movie, and I find it really work.
So I just recently had the opportunity to go see this movie in a theater in IMAX. Before that, I hadn't seen it in IMAX. I had something like a little theater back in Boston. So seeing it on this incredible scale and feeling my chair shaking with the score and the sound design was legitimately one of the greatest theatrical experiences I've ever had. You can tell, again, Christopher Nolan, he's got a story in mind, but that's not where his focus is. His focus is on showing this like incredible scale of what's happening. The dogfight sequences, like you said, are absolutely mind-blowing the way he shoots them. And I'm pretty sure for the most part, those dogfights are all practical.
Yes. Yeah.
They are.
To get these old warplanes, I'm sure had been refurbished over time, but up and going and to look realistic, what I'm assuming a World War II dogfight looked like. Incredible.
I will also say there's something to be said about the way that Nolan made it PG-13 that I really respect, because I feel like I have at least found that the majority of war movies don't really have an impact unless they're rated R, because you don't get the brutality of war across in PG-13 for the most part. But I think Nolan really does. And I think you pointed it out, Dan, like the reason why it gets across the brutality is because you have this ticking clock in the back of your mind. It's because you're not able to focus on one character to get really attached to. You have to just keep going in this mindset of war. You have to duck when the bombs are dropping. You have to cover your ears. It works so well, and you don't even see the Germans in the movie. It's brilliant.
And that cold open is really what did it, where you have a movie like Saving Private Ryan, where they're all storming the beaches of Normandy. It's bloody, it's gross, it's brutal, it's violent. This, not the same impact, but it uses sound or the lack of sound as these soldiers are walking through the streets of Dunkirk, and there's just you just hear the steps of their feet, and then they're ambushed, and just the tension, it is time and tension is what he uses to get that same impact across. Matty, what are your thoughts? Any thoughts on Dunkirk?
Yeah, I feel that obviously being from England, this is a event that we learned about a lot in school growing up. And when I heard that Nolan was doing a film on Dunkirk, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because every movie he's done has been something that he's written. He hasn't tackled an actual historic event yet. And we were, we were always told that if the Germans hadn't halted the march on Dunkirk, everyone in England would be speaking German right now. So it is such a massive historic event. I agree with you that it is really underrated, because to have such a notable director tackle such a pivotal moment in history, I feel like this movie absolutely should be bigger than it is. And it's definitely up there for me as one of his top movies, for sure.
Well, like I said, I made the executive choice to pick this film as our last one. Over the years, I feel like it's gotten less and less renowned, actually. I still consider it one of my favorite movies ever, but I did feel we needed to talk about one of his Batman trilogy films. And that film is not going to be Dark Knight Rises. I know a lot of people love Batman Begins as their favorite, but I feel like we do need to talk about the film that garnered Heath Ledger a posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Director.
Best
Supporting Actor, thank you, as his portrayal of the Joker in The Dark Knight. And I think this was the film that first and foremost really put Nolan on the map as the IMAX guy. That opening scene of the bank heist over the streets of Chicago, in quotes Gotham, and just how that whole scene broke down on what needed to be seen on the biggest screen possible was mind-blowing at the time. It was revolutionary at the time that it was done. And I think while you may poo-poo this movie as, is it really a Batman movie? I think it is. Regardless.
Absolutely.
You have one of the all-time...
It's definitely a Batman movie.
You have people who say it is actually a Joker movie. It's semantics here. You still have one of the greatest acting portrayals, not just in superhero movies, not just in Batman movies, but just in movies, with Heath Ledger's transformation into the Joker. Unfortunately, cost him his life.
Well, there is that, and with Heath's portrayal, I know like a lot of people think and you speak to it, it cost him his life. I feel like he did it took away a part of him. But when you go, and I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary about his life, that he was so full of joy and energy coming up with the character. It really was his magnum opus of a character. And that you guys both know way more about movies than me. The one topic that I feel like I can confidently speak on is Heath, because he's my absolute favorite actor in the world. I love him. A Knight's Tale is my favorite movie of all time.
It's a great one.
And it's great.
It's just, you hear about the way he would show up on set. He wouldn't even need to be there. It wouldn't even be his scene. Michael Jai White was talking about how he wasn't even in shot, but he would be making the noises. He would be walking around on set, and he would be doing his like little Joker mannerisms just to get the other people in the scene weirded out that the Joker was there and on camera. He would be doing that, not in like a method Jared Leto Joker kind of way, but he would do it. He would do it like in service of the people who were on set at the time, because they needed him to give that kind of vibe that he was this dark, looming figure. And he's the perfect rival to Batman, because they are essentially two halves of the same coin. And Joker is constantly pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. And he's the villain that's like, he just wants to watch the world burn. He doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about status. He just wants to watch Gotham just go up in flames. And there's no one more dangerous than a man that has absolutely nothing to lose. And when you have someone who's like just such a bright star, someone who's so loving and so caring as Heath was, to see someone like that go to that place that is the mark of a truly like once in a generation talent of an actor.
I agree completely with you. I think that Ledger's performance in this film is by far the standout. And again, when you have a director like Nolan, who is so renowned for what he does visually, to have a performance be the ultimate standout in your film is quite impressive. I'm about to really date myself. I'm sorry if this makes you guys feel old. I was 6 when this movie came out.
Oh, dear Lord. Oh,
God.
man.
And
Oof.
I distinctly remember, I remember it came out in like June of 2008, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I remember my brother and I had a babysitter who would come and watch us over the summer. And she came to watch us the morning after she had just seen The Dark Knight. And she was shaken. Like,
Wow.
she was like disturbed by it. She was like, I don't think you should see this movie until you're 15. I saw it when I was 11. And again, I think that this is a movie that I respect and appreciate more than I actually like. I don't tend to have a desire to go back and watch Nolan's trilogy for the most part. If I do choose to watch one of the 3 movies, it is usually this one, if only for that opening scene alone. But again, like the standout to me in this movie is Heath Ledger's performance and those incredibly well done action sequences. I think Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent is good until he becomes Two-Face, at which point I feel like he becomes kind of silly. I think that Bale is a really good Batman in this movie, but the voice is at its all-time worst.
You mean best.
I'm Batman.
In a way, I do. So again, like this is a movie that I feel like I have like much more complicated thoughts on than a lot of like I think the movie is admittedly very good, but it doesn't quite resonate with me the way that other Nolan movies do. And that's like his Dark Knight trilogy as a whole. I mean, my controversial opinion is that my 3 favorite Nolan movies are all the ones that he's made after his Dark Knight trilogy.
Fair.
Wow.
Hey, totally fair.
Fair.
You know, I think we could easily talk about many more of Nolan's films, but I do think it's time to get into our fantastic castings. Here, each of us will cast a Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, Ben Grimm, and Dr. Doom with an actor or actress Christopher Nolan has worked with previously and who has not had a major role in the MCU. So, guests first, Matty, please bless us with your Fantastic Four cast.
So this one, when you proposed that we do Nolan, I had the biggest grin across my face because of one certain actor that I have dreamt to have a role in the Fantastic Four. But I'll save him for last. So I have actually cast Aaron Eckhart as Reed Richards. I think he can pull off that kind of intellectual douchiness that you need to have in a Reed Richards. Like he knows he's the smartest person in the room, but he still has that kind of, he's intelligent, but he's not smart, if that makes sense. There's a difference between, to quote Dexter Jettster from Star Wars, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. I feel like he's very knowledgeable, but not too wise. So I feel like Aaron Eckhart has the perfect kind of persona to play someone like that. My Sue Storm, I probably should mention that I'm going off the basis that Kevin Feige has said this is not a origin story. So like I've picked actors that are, not 19, 20, 21-year-olds. I'm picking Carrie-Anne Moss as Sue Storm because I feel like she has that motherly warmth in all of her performances. Even like you go back and watch her as Trinity, like she's very warm and caring and loving, and that is essentially Sue Storm to a T. Like she's that loving motherly presence in the Fantastic Four. Like she cares for each member of the team. And I feel like Carrie-Anne Moss would really shine in that kind of a role. As Ben Grimm is the thing. You want someone who is big, imposing, can kick someone's ass. I'm going with Michael Jai White as the Thing, and as Ben Grimm. I think he would be awesome just because he can legitimately kick someone's ass. This one, I don't know. I know it's probably breaking a rule, kind of. As Johnny Storm, I am bringing Heath Ledger back from the dead because I want 10 Things I Hate About You era, cocky, suave, but absolute teen heartthrob Heath Ledger to play Johnny Storm. And then my final one, my absolute dream casting, is Cillian Murphy as Doctor Doom.
I think that is a great cast, despite necromancy having to play a part in your cast.
Yeah.
But no, I think you hit the nail on the head, at least with what you said you want to go for. And of course, having Cillian Murphy play a villain, much less a villain as prominent as Doctor Doom. How can you go wrong?
Have either of you ever watched Peaky Blinders?
I have, yes.
It's on my ever-growing list of shows. I just haven't gotten around to it.
If you see like his rise of becoming a politician towards like the end, like spoiler alert, season 5, season 6, is a lot of like his rise from the undergrowth and the streets of Birmingham to an MP and a politician. I feel like he has that perfect character arc that you could see from Doctor Doom.
Jack, any thoughts on Matty's cast?
It's a really, really solid cast, and I'm very excited to hear what your pitch is now. I think Ledger as Johnny Storm in that 10 Things I Hate About You era is like absolutely perfect. That's a really, really good call.
With that said, Jack, why don't you give us your cast?
Okay, so for my Reed Richards, I feel like you need somebody who can anchor a film. You need somebody who's got a lot of presence, somebody who can speak Nolan's dialogue in a way that feels very naturalistic. You just need a solid protagonist, maybe even the protagonist. So my Reed Richards is John David Washington.
Oh. Yes.
The protagonist of Tenet. No other name, because you don't need one. No. Sue Storm. There were a couple that I considered with this one. I did almost pick Emily Blunt as the fan cast, but I thought about it a little bit more, and I realized what I wanted from Sue Storm is somebody who I have always loved as an actor, but who I feel like hasn't necessarily gotten a chance to shine in a role yet. So I'm picking Piper Perabo, who is in The Prestige, but who I first became aware of from her role in the Steve Martin Cheaper by the Dozen movies. I think she's fantastic. But I really just think that she would bring gravitas to Sue Storm that the character needs. For my Johnny Storm, I'm picking someone who is going to be starring in Christopher Nolan's upcoming film, Oppenheimer. A person who I have loved since 2017 when they starred in a movie that they also co-directed with an actor who has also played Batman. This person has also directed one of the best performances from Adam Sandler and started one of my favorite movies from 2021, Licorice Pizza. Benny Safdie is going to be my Johnny Storm. I think that especially seeing his performance in Licorice Pizza, how much internalized trauma and character he has to play could be really fascinating for Johnny Storm, especially given where I want to go with my pitch. For Ben Grimm, I feel like you need someone who can anchor the team. You need somebody who can be soft-spoken, but also get to the point where they almost have to step in and be the leader. And for me, there was no other choice than David Oyelowo, who was Martin Luther King in Selma, but recently had a very good performance in See How They Run, which if you haven't seen, I highly recommend. So he's my Ben Grimm. And then for Dr. Doom, this will be explained in the pitch, so just go with me here. My Dr. Doom is also John David Washington.
Color me intrigued.
And that's all I'll say for now. But
I think I know where you're going with this, but I'm gonna wait because if I might be wrong, and I think I might be pleasantly surprised, but I have an inkling.
So my first remembrance of Piper Perabo was every family has like those weird films that just become like family classics. For us, Armageddon was one, Triple X was one, and
Oh,
Coyote Ugly was one. So I very much remember Piper
love Coyote
Perabo
Ugly.
from Coyote Ugly, one that you would totally watch as parents with your children. Totally normal. But that is where I first remember Piper Perabo. And I think you're right. I think she is certainly a quality actress and deserves a role like this. I'm excited to see how she fits into your pitch. Otherwise, across the board, I love the double casting. I'm excited to see how Betty Safdie, David Oyelowo play in the part. Solid cast, at least on paper so far. For my cast, it's shifted a little bit here and there. But for my Reed Richards, Jack talked about how you could have your protagonist be charming, charismatic, a force. I went the opposite route. I went with someone who's an asshole, who you want to hate, and it is very indicative for my pitch. I went with Casey Affleck as my Reed Richards.
Dunkin' Donuts, Casey Affleck.
Dunkin' Donuts, Casey Affleck. Grown up Timmy Shals. No, yes. Mainly, I want a very dour Reed Richards in this movie. I want someone who does come across intelligent, but also very full of himself. Looks like he could have been beaten down by life. And I feel like you just look at Casey Affleck and you get all of that.
You just want to give him a hug and ask him if he's okay.
You okay, Casey? It's okay.
Dr. Doom, you're gonna have to stop that now.
That's all I'm gonna hear now when I do this pitch.
Don't make me fight you, Dr. Doom. I just had Dunkin' this morning.
Okay. We can go down a dangerous rabbit hole here. For my Sue Storm, I went with someone who should not be with Casey Affleck because they are too filled with joy and way too good for Casey Affleck as Reed Richards. I went with his sister in Interstellar, Jessica Chastain, as Sue Storm. So Jessica Chastain is a chameleon. You ask her to do anything, and she'll do her best to do it. Whether it's Eyes of Tammy Faye, The Help, Zero Dark 30, Tree of Life. I loved her in Tree of Life. But I'm going to give her a shot to actually be in a good superhero movie. And this time it will be as Sue Storm. I want someone who, despite years of struggle being superhero, having to deal with keep a family together, a husband who is Casey Affleck, still tries to keep the positivity and the joy going. And I feel like Jessica Chastain can certainly do that. For my Johnny Storm, I'm going with an actor who is most notably famous for his role in The Boys on Amazon Prime. He's going to be in the upcoming Oppenheimer film, also notably in the first Hunger Games movie. I have cast Jack Quaid. He is going from
Yes! Yes! I was hoping one of us would.
I am very thrilled with Matty's exuberance over my casting of Jack Quaid.
Oh, yes.
I kind of want a hybrid of who he is as Huey from The Boys. Granted, he is a superhero. He's not trying to kill superheroes in this movie. And also kind of like the arrogant, like tough guy that he kind of gave off in the Hunger Games. Granted, it was a very small role, but I feel like that combination kind of gives you a Johnny Storm and the Johnny Storm I want in this movie. His ego hasn't really been in check anymore. He is doing his own thing. He's still part of the team, but you can kind of see that he wants to have that solo career at some point. And I feel like Jack Quaid could certainly do that. Okay, so for the last member of my Fantastic Four team, I have cast someone who he's been in Dunkirk, he's been in Inception, and he played Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. I'm going with Tom Hardy. I feel like Tom Hardy looks like a man who has been weighed down by life in a lot of his roles. He's a tough son of a bitch. He just entered this Taekwondo competition randomly.
Jiu-jitsu competition.
Jiu-jitsu thing.
He won it.
He won.
Yeah.
And I feel like I want that same energy as his character in the movie Warrior. I mean, the man just ripped the door off of a tank, but like this man who is just struggling to get by. And I want Tom Hardy I think Tom Hardy can play Ben Grimm as this man who's resigned himself to his lot being the thing, but is still weighed down by the heaviness of it. And not too many other people can do that like Tom Hardy can. Finally, for my Doctor Doom, I will say Doctor Doom is not going to be a prime antagonist in this film. He's going to be a presence. Doctor Doom is always going to be looming over the Fantastic Four. But I wanted to go with someone who was, when you see this actor, you just think, oh, this guy's just always going to play bad guys. And an actor who probably wouldn't mind being masked up most of the time and need to find an excuse to take it off. I'm going with one of the ultimate shit weasels. He was a villain in the recent Halo series on Paramount Plus, and that is Bern Gorman, who had a small role in The Dark Knight Rises. Dude, just a born shit weasel. Like, you look at him, he's like, oh yeah, probably a dick.
I can see it.
And I think just with the accent, the mask, everything, again, at least in the context of this movies and this franchise that I might be making, I think he would be a great opposite to the rest of the Fantastic Four. I don't see him being as much of a physical presence, but certainly an intelligent, a technological, magical even. I think Bern Gorman can bring all of that to the table.
Yeah, it's kind of the same with Killian. Like, Killian's not really a physically imposing guy. He's quite a skinny, like, thin guy. He's not physically imposing as well, but like, you just look at both of those actors and you could easily see them being an Eastern European dictator.
Well, those are casts. Any thoughts on my choices? Anything that you're like, oh, that's crazy?
Jack Quaid, Joyce Dolan might be the most brilliant piece of fan casting I've heard of. Yeah.
You know, I think your cast is pretty good, Dan, but you know, needs a little bit more Casey Affleck in it.
Well,
Dan, you didn't tell me that Casey Affleck was going to be on the podcast.
Well, with our films cast now, it is time to pitch our Christopher Nolan helmed Fantastic Four films.
But before we get into those pitches, I do have two questions for both of you. Matty, I think, answered a little bit already, but first, is your film an origin film?
Mine is not, no.
Mine is not either. Secondly, is it part of the MCU?
Yes.
Not necessarily, but it could be.
Similar answer to mine. Sure, why not? Kind of like, why not? With that said, Matty, please share your pitch for a Christopher Nolan Fantastic Four film.
Okay, so right away, in true Christopher Nolan fashion, we are starting with a flash forward to some kind of like a power surge, and Sue is screaming at Reed to power the machine down. She's screaming for him to stop, and he's screaming, I can't. But he's grabbed by Johnny in Johnny's human form, and then the camera immediately cuts to black. To me, this gives the audience the impression of, is this the scene that we're going to see them get their powers? But it's not. And then it opens back up to a shot of what was formerly the Avengers Tower is now the Baxter Building. Yes, the Fantastic Four bought out the Avengers Tower, and it is now the Baxter Building. Reed has called upon his old college friend, Victor Von Doom, to assist him in a new project. And we see the very first member get introduced is actually Johnny. Johnny arrives at the building, and we get our first cameo, because we know how MCU fans love Easter eggs. We get a cameo from Tom Hardy himself as Eddie Brock. Immediately puts a microphone and a camera in Johnny's face, as he loves, and asks, why is Reed choosing to work with a Latvian dictator? Boom, we get our first flashback to college. Reed and Victor meeting in a lecture for the first time. They're debating over the place of art in science. You know, we've often got the comparison of Doom is the Da Vinci to Reed's Einstein. So they're having that kind of a debate with each other. And my first act is a lot of the Fantastic Four public image taking a hit from working with Doom. You know, we have one night, Victor Von Doom's guards, like he has his robot guards, they attack a gang of youths for spray painting anti-Doom imagery on the side of the Baxter Building, which Johnny quickly takes care of that. So we see, oh, okay, they do have their powers. This isn't an origin story. He takes care of that. He walks in straight away, confronts Victor. Victor gives him oh, I forgot. we're in America now, you know, in Latveria, you know, I face a lot of hostility. So it's a lot, you know, it's a lot different there, a lot aggressive. I just forgot to turn that off. So we're getting straight away into a political, scientific kind of thriller story, because you don't know if Victor's really telling the truth. I mean, we know as the audience, but in the grand scope of it all, you don't know if he's telling the truth. This leads to tension starts arising within the team, with Reed specifically telling Johnny, if you want to play hero, if you want to be a superhero, go join the Avengers, because that's not what we do here. We're about bettering humanity. To which Sue reminds him, if he wants to better humanity, he can't forget about his own. This is where we see Ben for the first time. Johnny joins Ben at a blip day, a snap day, whatever they call it, party. And they just immediately start talking about how Reed has completely forgotten about the team as a whole, helping the little man in New York. And Ben actually, in a really emotional scene, will open up that Reed promised him that he would help get him back to his human form. And this project has kind of taken over it. And then we get an emotional scene where Johnny tells Ben, you know, you've got nothing to complain about. Literally everything he touches could go up in flames. And Ben, how could Ben know how that feels? To which Ben responds, he doesn't know how anything feels, because, you know, he's made of rock, and what kind of existence is that? And that really bonds Johnny and Ben together. And then in the second act, we get a lot of, I've kind of ripped this straight out of the Prestige, but a bit of a competitive rivalry between Reed and Victor coming back out from their old college days. And they're constantly trying to one up each other in theory and in technology, who can create the better I forgot to mention, they're working on a time machine. I should probably have mentioned that right at the start, but I didn't. They're working on what's called a time platform. Comic fans, if you've read any of the older Fantastic Four movies, you probably know where I'm going with this. And then one day we get either a flash forward or a flashback, depending on where Nolan wants to go with it, of Victor bringing in a massive case that he's had shipped from Latveria. And he tells Reed, under no circumstances are you to open this until the day that we launch this. And that leads the audience to think, is that Doom's armor? Is he about to turn from Victor Von Doom into Dr. Doom? And then that's when the third act comes and we get the reveal. Yes, that's when we get the turn. Victor appears wearing his Dr. Doom armor. He takes control of the time platform and takes it straight up to space. And in the attempt to stop him, Doom cuts the engine to the platform, and he's like, well, you can either come and stop me from traveling in time, or you can help the people below and stop this platform from crashing into the earth. Your choice. So they decide to finally work as a team, come back together as a unit, as a family unit, and stop the platform from crashing into the earth. Reed says, I will hold the engine in place, and Johnny, you can ignite the engine back up. But of course, we know what happens to rubber when it gets hot, right? It uses its elasticity. So Sue creates a barrier between the two of them. They stop the platform from falling, goes chasing back after Doom. We see straight away Ben is engaged in fighting with Doom. Doom throws him into the platform, into like the center console, which sparks the scene of the platform going crazy. Everything's going haywire. And then Doom, he kind of falls off. He disappears somewhere. I haven't thought that much into it yet. Then we get the scene from the start of Sue screaming at Reed to shut it off. He says he can't. The only way that they can do it is by destroying it. So Johnny this is where we hear Johnny for the first time say, flame on. We get the Human Torch in all his glory, just completely destroys the platform. The ship comes down back to Earth. They all walk off. And just as Johnny says, well, I'm glad that's over with, we hear a familiar voice in the background. It says, over. No, this is right where it starts. And Jonathan Majors as Kang comes walking right back out. And the big reveal is that Kang needed Reed and Doom to come up with the time platform and bring it to him in the 31st century, which is exactly where they have landed. Unknowingly, they have been transitioned to the 31st century and they are stuck there, which leads right in to Kang Dynasty.
Excellent pitch. very, very good. I would love to see this now.
Yeah, it again, it's baffling, and it makes me kind of mad that you, Jack, my guests, other guests we've had, just put so much. Makes me mad, and I also am very appreciative that you put so much time and genuine thought into these pitches, and it really showed there, Matty. I think, yeah, totally would watch the hell out of that movie.
Thank you. I wanted it to be like, I took some influence from the comics, which I know Kevin Feige and the MCU writers like to do. They like to take some influences, but not completely do a direct adaptation. I made a bit of I put through some Nolan tropes in there with the flash forwards and the flashbacks, and I feel like Doom could be he's like, as Jack said, he's not the primary antagonist. We get the reveal at the end that it was Kang all along.
Great, and I think that would be hey, if that's what we got in the MCU, I think great tie-in. Well done. Now, Jack, you have a tough act to follow, but I have faith that you will. Jack, give us your Christopher Nolan Fantastic Four pitch.
All right. So what I think Nolan would do with the Fantastic Four is similar to what he did with Batman. Take a dark storyline from the comics and create his own original mind-melting story surrounding it. So I want Nolan to open his Fantastic Four movie the same way he's opened his last two movies, an intense action sequence with a blaring score that drowns out the fight. However, this time, it's the Fantastic Four fighting their nemesis, Dr. Doom, who's wearing his signature mask to obscure his face. The four are on the ropes against Doom, and their attempts to strategize have been unsuccessful. Reed tells the team that he needs to face Doom one-on-one, but as he walks towards him, Johnny goes after Doom, his temper flaring. Doom kills Johnny, bringing all the attention onto the fallen member, and Doom escapes, although he leaves behind a keychain that Reed picks up. The four are now three. 6 months later, Reed, Sue, and Ben are a team in name only. Reed and Sue's marriage is fraud, and Ben has closed himself off from them, appearing only briefly. Reed is ready to walk away from it all, but before he can, Ben tells him that he may have figured something out. See, Ben had been working on a way for himself to control his appearance as the Thing, but in that process, he found he had inadvertently created a way of passing back through time. However, as Ben tells him, you replace yourself at that point in time, but it can only send you backwards and you don't de-age. Every minute you go back is a minute off your life. Reed, Sue, and Ben debate whether it's worth it or not, but Reed is the one who makes the call. If it was my brother, I would go back. It wouldn't be fair if we didn't do the same for Sue. The three agree to go backwards in time 6 months to the day before their fight. When they arrive back, they attempt to strategize the new plan of attack against Doom, but they lose Johnny again. Reed says it's fine, they can just go back again. But Ben reminds him that in the time we're living in, he hasn't invented this technology. It's going to take him another 6 months to build. In this next 6 month block, Sue and Reed attempt to reconcile their marriage, but still find the absence of Johnny too much to bear. Sue talks to Ben about it and asks if he knows whether or not this machine can actually change the past or if it simply creates a loop. Ben tells Sue he's not sure, but that he knows that he and Reed owe it to her to keep trying. They repeat this process multiple times, always getting the same result. Johnny always ends up passing away. As they continue this repetition, the relationship between Reed and Sue continues to fall apart. But what finally breaks everything is when they go back for the 12th time. At this point now, Reed, Sue, and Ben have all aged 6 years, which Johnny has, of course, taken notice of. He demands to know what's happening, and the others tell him. Johnny thinks about it for a moment, then decides he can accept his fate. He has a talk with Sue where she expresses her concerns with Reed, and he says that she doesn't have to forget, but that she has to forgive. They have their fight, and Johnny dies. But before Doom can escape this time, Reed throws the keychain at him. Doom looks down at it and notices something. It's not his keychain. It's a near identical one. The one that Doom had lost is sitting in the battlefield. Doom picks it up, walks over to his keychain, puts the two together. Perfect match. He takes off his mask. Looks exactly like Reed, but he's 6 years younger. Dr. Doom and Reed Richards were identical twins separated at birth who went on completely different paths in their life. And Doom grew up poor and resentful. He knew that he had a twin brother because of this keychain that he got. But and the second he saw Reed on TV as this leader of the Fantastic Four, this person who looked just like him, That's when he knew. And that was what forced him to create this persona of Dr. Doom. So Reed realizes that he now has to go to Dr. Doom. They have to figure out what they're going to be going forward now. Dr. Doom still resents Reed. Reed is attempting to mend this bridge between the two of them, but he lets slip about the time machine. This thing that can send you backward in time. And Doom forces Ben to recreate it for him, holding Reed and eventually Sue under not necessarily gunpoint, but threatening to kill them unless Ben recreates the machine for himself and Reed to go back and to switch lives, because he's done living in poverty in this terrible world that's beaten him down. It's time for a new life. Reed tells him that he's not going back. Doesn't tell him that it won't change his past. Dr. Doom says, fine by me, we'll see what your life looks like 30 years from now. Dr. Doom goes back, finds Reed as an infant, but he's been replaced now by a 30-year-old. But Dr. Doom doesn't realize this. And he thinks that the Reed Richards baby is himself as an infant. And so he then decides, I'll care for you. I'll make sure nobody ever hurts you. Cut to black. That's our Fantastic Four movie.
Hell yeah.
That was not where I thought you were going at all, but that was awesome.
Yeah, real mind F. Very Nolan-esque, especially post-Batman trilogy Nolan-esque. I'm just curious how this movie is going to be dumb, though. Like, you like your Nolan movies now.
Oh, I don't think that ending makes sense at all to me.
No, it doesn't. I was with you up until like Doom going back. I was like, wait, hold on. But if he goes back, then all right, just shut up and listen to Jack. Jack's gonna explain it. Just go with it. And then,
but he purposely didn't.
No, exactly. But that's like the rule of the world has been established that you replace your past self. He has now replaced infant him. Infant him no longer exists in this timeline. He is raising Reed Richards.
Awesome. Would watch the hell out of that.
Yeah, me too. That's awesome.
I don't know if I'd like it, but I'd watch the hell out of it.
I would watch it a solid 5 times more than I would watch Moonfall. I'll give you that.
Hey, we do not besmirch Moonfall on the Fantastic Four.
There's a list of movies that we don't.
I can't even say my own podcast name. You've enraged me so.
No Moonfall slander, no Mamma Mia slander, no Cat slander. There's a very specific list we'll send you, Matty.
People will know. Man, I don't like going last. Why do I do this to myself?
Save the best to last, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so my film is pretty straightforward, called The Fantastic Four. The more I think about it, the more I do feel it is probably an MCU film. At least with a version of the MCU. In this movie, we've seen Nolan play with thoughts of time, dreams, magic, competition, war, space, other buzzwords. This one, I think he is really going to kind of latch his claws into the concept of identity. That's what I want this movie to be about. And first and foremost, it is going to be a very Reed-forward film. The movie opens similarly to Jack's in this big, we are in the midst of a battle. This big kaiju-like demon monster has been unleashed at the hands of Dr. Doom. This is not known to the audience, by the by, but you see this big mystical creature. We're to assume that Doom has somehow developed the mystical arts a la Doctor Strange, which is something that has happened in the comics before. And it's this big sweeping IMAX spectacle that we're just thrust into. The Fantastic Four are doing their best to take it down. But time has gone by. They've been in the MCU. They've been established for some time in this world. and they've been fighting Doom for some time, but Doom has figured out the way to get the best of them, and they fail. Granted, not in the way you think. They get defeated by this monster, but Doom comes in and quote unquote saves the day. He is the one who gets rid of this monster, makes it, though he created it, he created this ruse to make it look like he was the one. Very Mysterio-esque from Far From Home, but better. And now public opinion has been shifting further and further from the Fantastic Four. Superheroes are becoming less and less in style. And Doom has been very outspoken about, we don't need superheroes. We can do, Doom can do this. Going further back, I have this theory that Doom is actually behind the war between Wakanda and Atlantis, or what is presumably whatever Atlantis is from Wakanda Forever, whatever they're going to be calling it. So he is this big power broker manipulating these fights between these countries, shifting power, and he's just trying to gain more of it. And this is just another way. With the Fantastic Four out of the way, he can do it. And we see the Fantastic Four put their tails between their legs, go back home. You see pundits on the news calling for the Fantastic Four to disband or stop their superheroing, praising Dr. Doom. Could be Fox News, who knows? But but we see Doom becoming more and more prevalent on the world stage. As more time goes by, you just see them kind of recluse themselves. Johnny's out doing his Playboy thing. Sue is trying to keep the family together, but Reed's just into his work and like, why do I do this shit? And then one day he's watching the news and you see Dr. Doom warn, like, we have to prepare. This Galactus is coming. This space being is coming. We need to stop. And Reed just like, fine, he can deal with it. People like him. But as soon as he says this interdimensional portal opens and a person steps out. Looks a little like him, but not quite. It's actually played by the younger version of himself in Interstellar, Timothee Chalamet. And he says, Reed, we need you to come with us. Your family can come with too, but we need you. We need your help. Reed doesn't feel like he has much of a choice, so he goes with and gets Ben, Johnny, Sue to go with him. As he enters in, you see this interdimensional like gathering space of people, all slight iterations of the Fantastic Four. And by the Fantastic Four, I mean Reed. We see all these different versions of Reed Richards in different similar costumes with different fours. Some are different races, some are different genders, some are different sexual orientation, like multiplicity of versions of Reed Richards. And you see a different Reed Richards come up who looks like Mark Rylance and say to him, welcome, Reed. This is the Interdimensional Council of Reed Richards.
Yes.
And so in this gathering space, you see a bunch of different Reed Richards played by the two we've mentioned, Timothee Chalamet, Mark Rylance. We see Robert Pattinson Reed Richards, Michael Caine, Elliot Page, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Marion Cotillard, Nestor Carbonell, Aidan Gillen, John Lithgow, Matthew McConaughey, Rami Malek, Wes Bentley, Hilary Swank, Morgan Freeman, Gary Oldman, Maggie Gyllenhaal, William Fichtner, and David Dastmalchian. Many more, but not prominent actors. All some iteration of Reed Richards. And they say, you are the last one. We need you here. You're the final piece to us stopping Galactus. So this movie is essentially him meeting all these different iterations of Reed Richards, learning about where they came from, why they are here. And you soon learn that all of these Reed Richards are from planets, are from Earths, from different multiverses where Galactus destroyed their planet. And they want to help make sure that doesn't happen anymore. We have kind of the side plot where other Reeds are interacting with Sue and Johnny, people who have lost their Sues, lost their Johnnies, lost their Bens, and reintroducing, re-meeting them and reconnecting. And they're all kind of learning lessons from each other. I'm not going to go into all the details about that side plot, but throughout the film, Reed starts kind of self-discovering, getting that vigor back. And from that, though, we get that normal Reed intelligence back, and he's just, something's just not feeling right about this. And he does some digging. He has some conversations with some other Reeds who he shows some of his evidence, like this isn't strange. And throughout this whole time, there's a group of Reeds you're kind of led not to trust, most specifically the William Fichtner, the Aidan Gillen, I'm trying to think, who else did I have? The Nestor Carbonell, a few of them who have constantly played kind of smarmy or evil characters, but in fact, it is the nice looking ones who have been tricking the other Reeds all along. Galactus isn't real. They have been harvesting these planets for their own scientific needs and tricking the other Reeds into thinking that Galactus was real and that they are what destroyed their planet, when in fact it was this original group of Reeds who did it in the first place. So now Reed is having this crisis of conscience, like, could I do this? How could I, Reed Richards, do this? I being we in this case. Eventually he and the quote-unquote good Reeds foil the plan and learn that Galactus isn't real. These Reeds fed the idea to Galactus to doom. So they go back, stop. There's this big fight. A whole bunch of different Reeds are fighting. Sue, Johnny, Ben are getting in the mix here. And eventually the Council of Reeds disbands. There are a bunch of casualties. Some may have escaped. Who knows? That's for the sequel to find out. But you have, in the end, Timothee Chalamet talking to Casey Affleck, Reed, saying, "We called it the Council. We called them my brothers. And what was the great work we could do? Together we could solve everything." And he dies. The good Reeds open a portal, send back the Fantastic Four that we know to go thwart Doom in his plan to bring about Galactus and the end of this multiverse's Earth, despite there not actually being a Galactus. It's what these Reeds created to harvest the Earth's energy for their science. And that is the movie.
That's perfect, Nolan.
Dude, that is so perfectly Nolan. I love that your nerd level went to over 9,000 by using the Interdimensional Council of Reeds. I think that was beautiful touch. I love the theme of the arrogance of knowledge and the arrogance of intelligence. Again, it comes back to the whole great power, great responsibility thing. And it's like Reed has historically been his own worst enemy. And his intelligence has been not only his biggest strength, but his biggest flaw. And I think your movie encapsulates that absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, Reed is very much all about coulda, not shoulda sometimes. And this was him not only struggling with an existential identity, but like him as a scientist too. And what limits would he go and his ego take? And seeing all these different versions of himself was a real lesson for him, like learning story. Like I imagine you hear stories from other Reeds about their homeworlds, their Sues, their Johnnies, their Bens. So this is going to be a long ass movie, just because you're going to be getting a lot of different stories from these other versions of Reed. And I do find that one big piece of Fantastic Four lore, like what the evil Reeds were trying to create, is the ultimate nullifier, which has usually been this device to stop Galactus. But in the end, it would have nullified other versions of the Earths in these various multiverses. So that would have been another twist. This ultimate nullifier, usually an item for good, ended up being the MacGuffin for evil.
You could add like a third twist on the end of it that Galactus, in a post-credit sequence, Galactus was real and he's
for
pissed.
sure.
Exactly.
For sure. 100%.
He's found out about everything going on and he's pissed.
And he assumes the identity of Aldrich Killian, and it's Guy Pearce.
Oh, I forgot I was Galactus.
Galactus / the Mandarin. Yeah, I think your pitch is perfectly long enough for Nolan.
Dan, I also thought your pitch was really good, Dan. I thought it was really good.
Thanks, Casey Affleck.
It was a really good starring vehicle for me to make my comeback after Manchester by the Sea.
This is kind of the Manchester by the Sea of superhero films.
That sounds like the perfect film for me then, Dan.
I I actually really liked him in the assassination of Jesse James by the cowboy.
Yeah, no,
Oh, yeah.
I was the coward in that one. Yeah, coward played that pretty well. I thought. Yeah,
Yeah, you did great in that one,
yeah.
Casey. I think you were great in that role.
Thanks, man. It means a lot. Thanks.
So, Matty, to your point about about the Interdimensional Council of Reeds, it really came about because I had a lot of these actors I'd considered for Reed Richards. So I went with the gif of the girl saying, "Why not both kinds of tortillas?" and going with all of them. Why not all
I
of them?
love that was your inspiration, man. That's so good.
Why not both? So I went with all of them.
Is, what's the budget for this movie? How are you going to pay for all these people?
Nolan.
People write Nolan blank checks. The budget is Christopher Nolan.
And again, it's some of them are in for 30 seconds.
Okay.
So it's like, hey, Matty McConaughey, it's Christopher Nolan. I need you for a day's work. And you'll be in
all right. I'll do that. No problem.
Hey, Jack, let's give us your Timmy Chow's.
Reed, so glad I found you. We gotta get you to our dimension now.
Matty.
No, come on, Reed. No, you see, I'm wearing this Fantastic Four hoodie. You see, it's pretty cool. No.
Matty, can we get a Michael Caine, Reed Richards?
Now you say, right, you gotta come back with me to our dimension because we need your help because Galactus is coming. And you might think, why am I English and why do I sound like Michael Caine? It's because I'm from a different universe, right? Where there's a whole council of Reeds.
Okay, I don't think we're topping this. I think it's time to end the show before we go insane and all develop extra personalities. We did it. Our fan castings, our pitches for a Christopher Nolan Fantastic Four film. We hope you, the listeners, enjoyed our exploration into this what-if scenario, along with some great impressions. We want to make a special note that the Fantastic Four podcast is hosted for free on Anchor, and we encourage you, if you have your own podcast idea, to check it out. It really is a great resource for getting your idea off the ground. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
If you are listening on YouTube, we would greatly appreciate you hitting that subscribe button and commenting with who your Christopher Nolan cast would be, on what you thought of our lists and pitches, and on which director you would want to see next.
I want to thank Matt Hart and our guest today, Matty Gunner, for the fantastic theme music they created for us. And I certainly want to thank you again, Matty, for being a guest today. I hope you had fun. Now, please tell our listeners where else they can find you.
So thank you so much for having me on, guys. As I said, this has been a long time coming. I'm glad we were finally able to do this. It was a lot of fun. You can find me on Twitter at Matty Gunner. You can find me on Instagram, Matty_Gunner. You can find my band Morna on all streaming platforms, or go to morna.co where you can find all our music and our merchandise. And you can also find me every Tuesday on the Project's YouTube channel for Class Action, where we pit two movies against each other, two actors, two franchises, two directors. And that's every Tuesday with my co-host PLD and Richard Eric Jarvie.
Awesome. That is our show. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm Dan Bettenhausen.
I'm Jack Mayer.
And I'm Casey Affleck.
and
I'm Michael Caine.
Well, and on behalf of Jack Mayer, Casey Affleck, Michael Caine, and Matty Gunner, we hope you all have a fantastic day.